The hospital halls were silent except for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional hurried footsteps of nurses. In the dimly lit room, a frail boy lay on the bed, his breathing slow but steady. A doctor stood beside him, eyes filled with both admiration and sorrow. "You are very brave," the doctor whispered. The boy managed a weak smile. "I just did what I had to do," he murmured. No one in the hospital could have imagined what this little boy would do next. An act so extraordinary that it would leave every person in tears, heads bowed in respect. The hospital was a place of both miracles and tragedies. Doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to save lives, yet not every story had a happy ending. In one small room, a boy named Liam lay on his hospital bed. He was only 10 years old, but he had spent most of his life battling a severe heart condition. The doctors had tried everything, but the truth was inescapable. His time was running out. Liam knew this. He could see the sadness in his mother's eyes, the forced smiles from the nurses who had grown fond of him. He wasn't afraid of leaving, but he wished he could do something meaningful before he did. One evening, as he stared at the ceiling, he overheard a conversation outside his room. "The surgery won't work without a donor," a nurse whispered. "We need a compatible heart, and time is running out." Liam's fingers curled into the bedsheet. A donor. Someone else needed a heart, one that he no longer needed. The next morning, Liam made a decision that would change everything. He waited until his mother left for a short break, then called for a doctor. Dr. Evans, the one who had treated him for years, entered the room, surprised to see Liam so serious. "Dr. Evans," Liam said softly, "I want to help someone before I go." The doctor's heart ached. "Liam, what do you mean?" "My heart." Liam swallowed. "Can you give it to someone who needs it?" Dr. Evans felt his throat tighten. "Liam, that's not something for you to worry about." "But I do worry," Liam insisted, his small hands gripping the blanket. "If I can't live, at least let someone else live because of me." Tears burned in Dr. Evans's eyes. He had seen strength in many patients, but this was beyond anything he had ever witnessed. Liam's mother returned later, unaware of her son's request. But the doctors could not ignore his words. When his condition worsened days later, the inevitable happened. Liam peacefully closed his eyes for the last time. That same night, another child in the hospital received a life-saving transplant. Liam's heart continued to beat, giving life to someone else. The next morning, as the hospital staff gathered, they held a moment of silence for the bravest boy they had ever known. Doctors, nurses, patients, and even visitors bowed their heads, tears falling freely. Liam was gone, but he had left behind a miracle. The hospital room felt colder than usual. Liam's mother sat by his bedside, holding his small, fragile hand. The heart monitor beeped steadily, but she knew his time was close. She had spent every night whispering to him, telling him stories of the world outside, the world he never had the chance to fully explore. "My little adventurer," she murmured, brushing his golden hair. "You always wanted to see the ocean, remember?" Liam's lips curved into a faint smile. His eyes, once filled with mischief and curiosity, were tired now. "I will, Mom," he whispered. "I'll see it through someone else's eyes." Tears welled up in her eyes. She had learned about his decision only the night before, when Dr. Evans had gently explained it to her. At first, she refused to believe it. How could her son, her little boy, have made such a choice? But when she looked into his eyes, she understood. Liam was ready, and he wanted to give someone else a chance. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Liam took his last breath. His heartbeat, so small yet so strong, finally stopped. And somewhere else in the hospital, in another cold, sterile room, a little girl named Sophie opened her eyes. Her parents had been waiting for weeks, praying for a miracle. Sophie was just 8 years old, and without a new heart, she wouldn't have survived much longer. When the doctors told them the news, that a heart had been donated, that their daughter had been given another chance, they broke down in tears. They didn't know where the heart had come from, not yet. But Liam's mother knew. The morning after Liam's passing, something happened that no one in the hospital had ever seen before. At exactly 9 a.m., the entire medical staff, doctors, nurses, janitors, even the hospital director, gathered in the main corridor. For a full minute, silence fell over the entire building. And then, one by one, they bowed their heads. Patients and visitors passing by stopped in confusion. Then, as whispers spread about what had happened, the story of a 10-year-old boy who had given away his own heart, tears began to flow. Even the toughest doctors, those who had spent years witnessing death and suffering, couldn't hold back their emotions. Liam's selflessness had touched them all. His mother stood among them, her hands trembling as she clutched the last letter he had written. "Mom, don't be sad. I won't be gone. I'll still be here, in the laughter of other children, in the stories you tell, in the beating heart of someone who needed it more than I did. Please smile for me." She pressed the paper to her chest. For the first time since he had left, she smiled, through her tears. Months later, Liam's mother received a letter. It was from Sophie's parents. They had learned the truth. Inside the envelope was a picture of Sophie, smiling brightly, her cheeks rosy with health. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Thank you, Liam. I will live for both of us." And for the first time in a long time, Liam's mother felt warmth in her heart. Because even though her son was gone, his heart was still beating. Sophie sat by the window, her tiny fingers tracing the raindrops sliding down the glass. It had been 3 months since her surgery, but everything still felt like a dream. She placed her hand over her chest, feeling the steady rhythm of her heart. No, not her heart. Liam's heart. Before the transplant, Sophie had been too weak to run, too tired to even play with her friends. Every day had been a battle just to breathe. But now every morning felt like a miracle. Her parents watched her in awe. They had prepared themselves for the worst, for the possibility that their daughter wouldn't make it. But then, in the darkest hour, a heart had arrived. A gift from a boy they had never met. Her mother wiped away a tear and placed a gentle hand on Sophie's shoulder. "Do you remember what you wrote in your letter?" she asked softly. Sophie nodded. "Thank you, Liam. I will live for both of us." She had meant every word. That evening, Sophie ran through the garden for the first time in years, laughing as the wind brushed against her face. And somewhere, somehow, she believed Liam was laughing with her. Liam's mother still visited the hospital every week. At first, she wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because she couldn't let go. Maybe it was because a part of her still expected to hear her son's laughter in the hallways. But over time, she found a new purpose. She started volunteering in the children's ward, reading stories to kids who were too sick to go outside. She learned their names, held their hands during painful treatments, and wiped away their tears. One day, Dr. Evans approached her with an idea. "We want to start a foundation," he said, "in Liam's name, to help other children like him." Tears welled up in her eyes. A foundation, a way for Liam's kindness to live on. She agreed without hesitation. Months later, on what would have been Liam's 11th birthday, the Liam's Heart Foundation was officially launched. It provided medical assistance to families in need, raised awareness about organ donation, and gave hope to those who had none. Liam's story spread far beyond the hospital walls. News outlets shared his act of selflessness, and soon, thousands of people were inspired to become organ donors. He had changed the world. Even in death, he was saving lives. A year passed. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Liam's mother received a call. "There's someone who wants to meet you," Dr. Evans said. She knew who it was before he even spoke her name. Sophie. Her heart pounded as she arrived at the hospital. And then, she saw her. A little girl with bright eyes and rosy cheeks, standing next to her parents, clutching a small stuffed bear. Liam's bear. Sophie ran forward and threw her arms around Liam's mother. "Thank you," she whispered. For a moment, there were no words, only tears. Then, Sophie took Liam's mother's hand and placed it over her chest. "Do you feel it?" she asked. A steady, strong heartbeat. Liam's heartbeat. Liam's mother closed her eyes and smiled through her tears. "Yes," she whispered, "I do." And in that moment, she knew Liam was still here. Not just in Sophie. Not just in the foundation. But in every life he had touched. And he always would be. Years later, Sophie grew up to become a doctor. Inspired by the boy who had saved her, she dedicated her life to helping children with heart conditions, just as Liam once had. And every year, on the anniversary of her transplant, she visited his grave. She would place a single white rose on the stone and whisper the same words. "Thank you, Liam. I am still living for both of us." And somewhere, somehow, she knew he was smiling.